So I'm going to introduce our guest speaker today, who is Rania Mahdi, a Palestinian jurist and lawyer who lives in Geneva and is a senior consultant in international law. I myself here in France heard Rania for the first time when she was the invited speaker for an online conference organized by a French association, the Groupe Recherche, Éducation et Perspective, Group for Research, Education and Perspective, in 2020. The title of the conference that time was a question, which is as burning a question today as it was then, which was, what rights for the Palestinians in the occupied territories? We all know that law can serve justice and defend those rights, or on the contrary, serve private and or political interests and trample them brutally. It all depends naturally on who determines the law, who wields it, and in the name and service of whom. We originally invited Rania Mahdi to CAFPE Palestine a few months ago, simply because she seemed particularly qualified to explore these questions with us as they relate to the Palestinian experience under Israeli occupation. But since then, the reality of this legal double standard has been dramatically driven home to all of us as we've watched the Israeli Defense Ministry designate as terrorist, quote unquote, 6 of the most prominent Palestine-focused NGOs. And Rania today comes to us straight from the front, so to speak, closely involved as she is in the legal defense of these unjustly accused and abused organizations. I know Rania doesn't want us to waste time on a long introduction, so briefly let it be said that she brings to the subject decades of experience in legal advocacy and has lived and traveled really all over the globe. Born in Ramallah, she studied law in Baghdad, Istanbul, and the School for Oriental Studies in London. Like her fellow Palestinians, she was born and raised between two worlds, as she says. Hence, an early, deep, and personal concern with the questions of exile and displacement led her to specialize in international and human rights law, focusing in particular on the rights of indigenous and minority populations. At the time before Zoom and COVID, she lived with the Zapatists in Mexico, then with the Mapuche Indians in the mountains of Chile, on the jungle frontier amidst the Chiapas, in Ecuador with the Pachacutics, later in South Africa, in Algeria amongst the Amazigh, in Iraq with the Kurds, and in China with the Uyghurs. And amazingly, she is here today with us. She defended the cause of women in China, has spoken out against racism and intolerance at venues in South Africa, and represented the United Nations High Commission on Refugees. And above all, she is a longstanding defender of Palestinian rights, using all of her legal savvy to defend the Gazan cause in 2009 before the International Criminal Court at The Hague, and has expressed her deep concern with the violence on the Gaza-Israel border before innumerable state assemblies and seats of government and before the European Union. So we welcome you warmly, and the floor is yours, dear Rania. Go ahead.
First of all, I thank you a lot for this. It's a very long introduction. Normally, yeah, I'm not like that, but it's okay. Thanks a lot. And I hope you are all doing well and your beloved ones all healthy. In fact, people everywhere, they are suffered during the confinement, which lasts less than 1 year. And now I have to remind everybody here that the Palestinians were confined since 73 years. I'm sorry to do this comparison because, you know, when we were, in fact, you know, like shops closed in Europe, in Palestine, you know, if I don't know if you have seen in Hebron, there is a lot of shops were closed by the settlers when there is no free of movement. The same as in Palestine, the ban of travel, etc. All these things, you know, we, the Europeans, I mean, in Europe or other countries, we suffered because this is not really similar to our life, but this is what's happened. So in fact, we are very close to the 29 of November, which really remind us of the anniversary of the resolution 181, which advocated for the partition of Palestine into 2 states, one Arab and one Jewish in 1977. So it's we are very close, and we repeat yearly like this day in order to remind the international community about this day, about the suffering of the Palestinian. And because today is the 20th of November, which also a very important day. It's the World Children's Day, which was established in 1954, you know, as a universal Children's Day, and it's celebrated every year to awareness among children worldwide. And here I want just to remind the people about the suffering of the Palestinian children when it comes to this day. You know, first of all, sometimes there is no access to schools, which is, this is really linked us to the right of education. Before, in the past, I remember we suffered a lot working with the international community to let access after the building of the wall, you know. And the wall, if I want to add here, the wall, according to ICJ, it's illegal and should be dismantled. But of course, the Israeli continue building and, you know, separating villages, cities, farms, etc. The other issue, which is the trauma in which the Palestinian children are suffered, because either the father or brother or somebody from the family in prison, for them it's something, you know, they can't understand why this person is in prison. The secondly, in which one of the film I sent you, the fear to lose their houses, because when they heard, when they saw that there is many houses have been demolished, so this is puts the children in this trauma, in fact, to lose their homes. And for a child, his home, it's his belongings, it's his room, it's his bed, etc. And also there is this daily check-in, like in Hebron, when children want to go to school and they live behind the checkpoint, then they have daily, can you imagine daily, the Israeli, you know, let's say army have to check what they have in their bags. And also I want here to give the example in which the DCI, Defense Children International, speaks a lot about it, about the detention of the children. And it seems that 157 Palestinian minors were held in Israeli prison as security detainee. You can imagine. And child, according to the definition of a child, it's under the age of 18, but we saw children 13, 14, 15, 15 years old. And I remember in 2018, I invited a mother of a child, his name is Shadi, 13 years old. He was really under arrest. And unfortunately, the Israeli, they always found a pretext why they put these children in prison. And they, when they speak outside in the UN or somewhere else, they said, this is re-educate the children, but not really, they are not really under arrest. But in fact, when you really take the child from his family, from his mother, from his house, I can't call it really re-educate the child. So for me, it's, and I remember here because I took this word, which is Jeff Helper. He used to be the director of Committee Against House Demolition, Israeli organization in which we work together and we share many panels in the UN. He used to say, no home, no homeland. So you can imagine that for a child. So this is just because we are in this day. In fact, coming back to the Palestinian NGOs, in which among them the DCI, Defense Children International, if you remember, okay, the director, he wasn't held in prison, but they were accused as a terrorist organization. And I want to remind you that the DCI, in fact, they confiscate all the computers, you know, which is mean there is testimonies, etc., and important really materials in the computer. You can imagine your computer, you don't want anybody to open it. This is why we have, in fact, a password. So you can imagine when it comes to an organization working for that. And hopefully I will come to that later. Yesterday, during the meeting with the Commission of Inquiry, there were many representatives of these organizations, not the Palestinian one, but the international ones. And among them was the DCI Europe. They are based in Geneva. Luckily, I'm in Geneva, in fact, and it was my intention to be in Geneva. It wasn't really suddenly I found myself in Geneva. after all these trips or studies or continued information, because I understand from the beginning that if I want to do something related to my country and to change the way of my let's say, resistance, it should be using the language of the international community, which is laws, human rights law, international law, etc. And just here to say, because in the beginning, when I start to work for the issue of refugees, I remember that people thinking the issue is just to give them food and health, etc. Then I said, no, we want to work for the root cause of this issue. And I was very happy yesterday during the meeting, the High Commissioner was really many times repeated the word that our work, we have to look for the root cause of these violations. Because if I just, do it in a very informal way, this commission of inquiry was created after a very important resolution that we work very hardly, really, to oblige states to vote in favor. And it's the first time in the history of the United Nations there is something called ongoing commission of inquiry. Ongoing, which, because in the past we used to have, after all wars in Gaza, commission of inquiry valid 1 year or 6 months, and then they put their report. It was voted in the UN, and that's it. It's like papers, and that's it. But the ongoing, which is mean every day, the violations should be really, let's say, reported to them, and they will prepare their expertise. And of course, this is also something very important. Although some people, they could say, but this is the Israeli, they don't care. And we saw before 10 days or 2 weeks, the Israeli representative, he even tears the report of the UN, like they don't care. But in fact, for me, it's a childish action. I don't want really to stop here about this. Anyway, because I'm talking about, I'm in front of doctors who were really working hardly or really informing, the members about the situation of let's say, the mental health of the Palestinians. And I remember in the past, we used to have always with us, in fact, the Physicians for Human Rights, which is a very good organization, as well, MAP, which is based in London. I don't know if you know them. I used to know their representative, and we used to share panels, because if we want to speak about human rights, we can't really avoid talking about the mental health and also the health in general of the Palestinians. Talking now about what's happened, the last decision of before 2 weeks, or in October, in fact, according to the Israeli occupation, that they accuse these 6 important organizations as a terrorist organization. It's become really more and more difficult to speak up in support of Palestinians without being silenced, censored, or attacked. So they try to attack us during our interventions in the UN. And here I want to say many of the Palestinians, unfortunately, they are unable to come. Either they are forbidden to reach, Switzerland. The question was never a visa. It's easy, we got the visa when it comes to come to intervene in the United Nations. And so this is also another issue in which the international community have to move. And of course, we were happy when we contact the special rapporteur, Mr. Michael Lynk, or before Mr. Richard Falk, all their reports. But the issue, if we want to speak about laws, and according to the title of this panel, for me, the law, it's still a very important arm. And I will continue really using this arm, unless it's became invalid. But for me, I believe of justice, although if I want to link the right of resistance, in which I used to be one of these, let's say, Palestinians who believe of the armed resistance, etc. But the world is changed, and now we have also to know which kind of tools we have to use in order to convince and to inform the community that really we have rights. And if I want to go back, because always we speak about the UN, and I'm very much criticized by even the Palestinians, because I still believe of the UN, and for them, of course, the UN, who are the one who create the Israeli state, in which there is many conditions, or the Israeli have really to conditions and obligations, in fact. But in fact, the Israeli until now, they never respect these obligations. So this is why when there is any report or any resolution in favor of the Palestinians, it's not because the UN really in favor of the Palestinians, but it's because we work hard to remind the international community about all these conventions or all these agreements when it comes to laws, human rights law, humanitarian law, and other really laws in which we are really working hardly, in fact. And just now, because we were, you know, I have this delegation from Palestinians who were in Geneva in order really to raise their voice in the UN. And we speak really largely about if really in the future, none of them are able to come to address to the UN, what's the solution? And this is also another big problem, because you know, normally people comes from all over the world. The question, it's not just to speak, but the question, it's to advocate, it's to meet with other people, it's to see what's happening in the world. It's not enough really just to Google what's happening, but when we meet with other people, and I was very active until 2019 with the Forum of Business and Human Rights, with other treaties in which people come from Latin America, from South Africa, from all African countries. And this is how we put our objectives together. Because if I'm fighting against the settlements in which they really confiscate the land, and the product of these really settlements really transfer everywhere in the European markets. So this is mean I have also to defend or to support the people who are against the mines, against, you know, it's like, I want to give you one example in which I always bring. France is the fourth country in the world when it comes to gold, because they have a lot of gold. So how it comes that there is no mine in France? So from where comes the gold? And I don't want to bring another example when it comes to Belgium about the diamond, and there is no mines of diamond in Belgium. So this is, if we want to go to see how it works, or who are the people who work in these mines in order to produce these materials, I'm not against, but in fact, you see that even kids, they have no access to schools, they have no health care, etc. So this is just one example that we have, population from the world, we have to put our efforts together when it comes to some issues. This is why from the beginning I started to join all these forums, you know, international forums, social forums, or other forums. Migration forum was the best one in Ecuador, because I never imagined that I will meet immigrants from all over the world. And here, if we talk, because it's 73 years since, in fact, the mass transfer of the Palestinians, and in fact, I can just here said one word, which is the Palestinian refugees are the largest and the longest in the history. It's never happened that a population since 73 years, they remain refugees. I'm talking to you now, I was never a refugee in Europe, but I'm a refugee in my own country, because my parents originally from Jaffa, and they left Jaffa to Ramallah. So I'm considered as a refugee. My name is registered in this Hot Commissariat or in the UNRWA as a refugee. So the differences between Palestinian refugees and other refugees, when they got the protection or the nationality from one country, they are able to return back to their country and to live, even because they are protected. The only one who has no right to return, it's the Palestinian refugees. And here, I'm sorry to say again, that after 39 years, I was able to return back to see my family and sleep in my bed. After 39 years, it's just because the intervention of the Swiss parliamentarian, and this is how I joined a group and I was able to enter the territory. It's not because of the age, it's because the Israeli accept that I was included with this delegation. Of course, I signed a lot of papers and I respect my engagement in order to be able to go to visit my family, my mother, etc. Because my father died 9 years, I didn't see him, so it was something let's say affect me a lot that you know, I wasn't able to see him when he was ill. I wasn't able to see him before he died. Anyway, so this is one of the issues in which I think it's very important to repeat or to keep really reminding the community, the international community, the UN and other bodies, not just about the Israeli violations which affect the Palestinian lives, but also how could people remain in this situation? It's a shame. It's a shame even sometimes when I speak with the really well-known lawyers, you know, or defenders of international law, when we bring this issue, then they said, yeah, this is something complicated. It's politicized. It's politicized. Of course it's politicized because it doesn't exist a political will to solve this issue. This is why the Palestinian issue continued and the Palestinians continue this suffering. I write some notes in order not to be really in all directions because sometimes it's hard. So I want just here to speak a little bit about the ICC, in which why the ICC accept when the Palestinian really address to the International Criminal Court. First of all, you know, there is the law of occupation exists, in which really the occupied, the occupation, there is laws in which they have to respect, and they have also which is applied to the people who are occupied. And this is why the ICC, in fact, they assume that the territory of Palestine occupied. So this is well known. Nobody can really say against. And in this sense, in fact, according to Fourth Geneva Convention in 1907 and in the Fourth Convention 1948, it's assumed that individuals within the OPT meeting the nationality test set forth in Article 4 of Fourth Geneva Convention, which is applied for the Palestinian, and they are qualified as protected person. So this is one of the issues in which we continue, of course, to remind the international community that the Palestinian population should be protected, not just by the international community, but as well by the Israeli occupation, you know. And here, because we speak about the right to health, I mean, you know better than me how the Palestinians were treated when it comes to this issue, especially about all the reports I read, I mean, during the Human Rights Council, which was ended before 1 month, that the Israeli, in fact, no, we call, in fact, one of the recommendation we did in front of the committee, that we calling on Israel to uphold Palestinians' right to health, because, in fact, Israel's obligation to guarantee the right to health of Palestinians cannot continue forever, and the Israeli must work forwards ending this obligation, which drives from its status to an occupying power. This is especially true in the light of the prolonged occupation, because it's never happened that there is a people and the land still occupied until now. And in fact, we noticed that the situation became more and more hard. It's not really, we don't feel that there is ending of this. We heard like monthly or yearly that the Israeli ministers really gave they give the right to rebuild or to build more and more settlements. And somebody told me that most of these settlements are empty, but in fact, it's a way how they can really establish things, and they could really encourage some Jewish from all over the world to come to live there. And I want to remind you, with all these wars happened in the Middle East, I remember when the Jewish from Iraq, they were really passed by third country in order to reach Israel, and they are there. When the war started in Yemen as well, I forget the number, it's less than 1,000, by the way, Yemeni Jewish who left. And I want to remind you when it was the Ethiopia-Eritrea war as well. So in fact, any conflict anywhere in the world, the Israeli working really hardly in order to gather these Jewish to the state. And here, this is led us to speak about the law, the Knesset law in 2018, in which Israel considered as a Jewish state. So if we want to speak about this, what's mean that this country, it's just for the Jewish? What about, the population? So it's a racist country, this racist laws, in fact, applied for the own population. I don't want here to speak about the third report, in which they speak about many violations committed by this convention, and which Israel is a part of this convention, that racism, it's something forbidden. But in fact, if you want to speak that the Jewish who comes in Europe, or the Jewish who comes from Africa, or the Jewish who comes from other countries, they are really treated completely differently. So here, this has led me to speak. What about the Arabs? They call them Arab, the Palestinians who remain in Palestine after 48. In fact, they don't call them Palestinians, they call them the Arab of Israel, in which really I disagree, because they are the Palestinians who really remain in the land to protect their houses or their lands. And this is something I want just to remember when I visit Jaffa. Then we have to pay the family from Bologna, Israeli Jewish family who live in our home, and we have to pay them money in order to be able to visit, because my parents insisted that we have to know our origin, we have to see the land, we have to see the home, etc. So this is also another issue. So you can imagine when a Palestinian not just in Israel or in occupied really 48, but also in Jerusalem, as what's happening now, that many houses are risking to be, unfortunately, either demolished or taken by the colonizers. And this is another issue. The violence of colonizer really affects a lot the life of the Palestinians. And according to one report, I received it from B'Tselem, which said that more than 10,000 trees have been really uprooted during this year, by the settlers. And of course, they were always protected by the Israeli army. And just before weeks, one of the friends or person I know, he told me that they work hard and they gather the harvest of the olive, and next day when they come, it doesn't exist. So the colonizers, in fact, they enter the land and they steal even the harvest. So this is, in fact, it's many issues. I prepare like 20 pages, issues in which very important to bring to your attention. But because I should not forget what's happened in Gaza, especially many cases, especially children who really have this illness, the cancer illness, and it doesn't exist any hospital in Gaza. And to get the permission to have access to Jerusalem or to any other hospital in the OPT, in fact, this is really hard. And if they accept, the Israeli authority, if they accept, which is mean to let the children alone, they refuse that they could be accompanied by mother or anybody from the family. This is also another issue in which really we continue really highlighting this issue to the international community. One of the issues in which I'm very, let's say, optimistic with this ongoing commission, which started the work just yesterday, we met them. In fact, they want to highlight the issues in which never have been treated by the UN, because there is so many issues when we want to speak about Israel-Palestine that we can't cover everything. And as you notice now, these 6 Palestinian NGOs in which really accused to be terrorists, and this is mean that they will not get any more fund, they will not be able to travel, and I'm sure that their materials will be confiscated. And I think everybody know about the Pegasus program in which spying their telephones, and they discovered from this organization, they discovered that their telephone were really let's say the information were taken during the last year, so in which they didn't really notice that. And just because I was angry, I said, but why you have Israeli telephone? Then he said, unfortunately, because we don't have the right when we are based in Jerusalem to have a Palestinian SIM card, and when we are in Palestine, in Ramallah, we don't have the right to get Israeli SIM card. So this is also another issue. One important issue in which people are avoid to really mention, which is in fact the collaboration between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli Authority. The Palestinian Authority pretend that this is in fact according to Oslo agreement, but the Israeli, they never respect this agreement, and this is in fact even many leaders, international leaders who were very much working hard for this agreement, they said unfortunately the agreement is not any more valid. But in fact the Palestinian Authority, in order to get the finance that passed by either by the European countries or other really countries, so it should pass by the Israeli banks. So in order to get this money to pay the salaries and to continue what they are doing, so there is this kind of collaboration in which they call it for security measures. But the security measures, I don't know, is it for the Palestinian leaders or for the Israeli occupation army? So this is in fact the most important issues that I like to mention. Other issue, Gaza, it's not just really the blockade comes from the Israeli part, but here I have to mention that the Egyptians as well make the life very hard for the Palestinians who want to travel, either to enter or to leave, and there is a lot of taxes they have to pay. Some people, they are unable. Many students, we get them scholarship to travel either in Netherlands or other countries. They got everything, but unfortunately at even the visa they got it, but they were unable to leave the territory. So in fact, it's like a deal, Israel with other countries in the region, in order really to make hard the life of the Palestinians, which is mean they were accept at the end for anything in order really to live in peace. The world is changed. It's not the same. This is why when I start to talk about the right to resist or about the laws, before in the past, everybody applauded the Palestinians when they were in Lebanon and they were fighting, etc. And we considered many persons as heroes because of their fight. But now the world is changed. The language is changed as well. And I don't think now we are able to convince the international community when we use arms, if we have arms. So this is why, and I think I arrived to this level of comprehension while I was very young, because I said the world is changed and now we have to start to speak the language of the international community. So the main issues in which is very important always to highlight the issues of refugees, Gaza, Jerusalem, and Hebron, because these four really cases in which the hardest, of course, among other hard things, the population really live with this issue daily. But I mean, these cases should be really taken on consideration if we want to find a durable solution for the Palestinians. And I remember many friends who didn't know nothing about what's happening there. When we send them in a mission there, and when they visit Hebron, they come, some of them, they were traumatized, some of them crying, you know, I never saw that happened. And I remember even Swiss parliamentarian, I prepared for them a mission. When they came back, they were really unable to speak anything, because it was something they didn't imagine that this could happen, and the community kept silent, you know, or just reports. But unfortunately, reports, if it's just you know, filled of the drawers in the UN and not really implemented, so it doesn't mean anything. So and here I want to remind something that in May, when it happened that the Israeli attacked Gaza for the 5th or the 6th or the 8th time, you know, why the international community moved quickly? Because in fact, the let's say the resistance in Gaza, or whatever we want to call them, you know, say they start to send their missiles, and this is affect, of course, and the Israeli, they went, you know, to cover themselves. Some houses have been affected, some people as well, you know, but I can't compare the number which was lost in Gaza. Here, I don't like to bring numbers. The issue, it's not like two Israeli killed and hundreds of Palestinians killed. No, for me, it's really hard when the civilians who are the one who pay the price, you know, from both parts. Okay, so now as a Palestinian, of course, I disagree that every 2 years there is a war against the population in Gaza, and then at the end we kept silent. But this time, this last May, when because some houses or you know, it affects the Israeli lives, then start the international community really moving and interventions, etc., in order to stop this issue. Then okay, we will call for agreement, we will stop that, and then this is how we were able to really to push the Human Rights Council in order to establish this ongoing violation. Honestly speaking, I'm a very optimistic person, but I don't know my optimism if it will save really lives in the future, Gazans or others. But daily we heard about really people who have been killed. Just before 2 days, a guy 13 years old. So a child of 13 years old, I don't really imagine how it comes for a soldier really to kill the child. I don't want to give many examples because, in fact, just daily, if you open the newspaper or you look what's happened there, you will see either a prisoner or somebody. Other issue in which I was very much active for the liberation of George Brahim Abdallah, who is in French prison since 38 years. This is remind me of many cases of Palestinians who are really more than 40 years in prison. Here there is a guy from family Barghouti, 41 years, he's still held in prisons. And there is some cases who are judged for 200 years. Can you imagine that? And all over the world, you know, there is 30 years, then after that, the person, there is conditions and he is freed. So in fact, the Palestinians are treated differently than any other prisoner in the world. Okay, there is some countries who are still really violate these rights, but this is not my subject. So in fact, this is what we are calling, you know, in all sessions of Human Rights Council, or when I address to the ICC and I present the report of Badil, which is, it was approval that the Israeli attack, you know, yearly or each 2 years to Gaza, it's in fact to force population transfer. And this is why always when we speak, we say we have to go to the root cause. The root cause was the occupation, colonization, and the system of apartheid and the mass population transfer. I speak a lot, I know. I don't hear.
I wonder if you mentioned the movie that you wanted to show. I don't know if
I sent it to Martin by email. Yeah.
Can you show that, Martin? Is that possible?
I send it to Marta. I don't know how.
Yeah.
I didn't receive the link. So maybe we just to carry on with the conversation. Yes, I think we've given a very good background to the human rights violations and the legal violations, Rania. It's very sort of pretty comprehensive, really.
Yeah.
So maybe we could carry on to questions.
Yeah. Yeah. We have several questions, one of which is yours, Martin. So since you have the floor, why don't you ask your question that you put in the chat?
Yeah. Okay. When your talk reminded me of the first time going to in Ramallah and meeting with Defence of the Child International, and the lawyer who was speaking to us talked about his contacts with, because they visited London to meet with Foreign Office officials to try and represent the situation to influence British policy. And he was saying that at the lower level, you could have a reasonable conversation with a British Foreign Office official. You know, it felt like you were communicating with somebody who understood what you were sort of saying, but that above a certain level, I think he sort of indicated it was more like talking to a sort of automatons who couldn't take in, who refused to kind of engage really with the information and the meaning of what was being presented to them. And I wondered what your experience of British and European officials is when you present to them the case, the Palestinian case in the European Union, for example. How do they respond? How do they manage to go on supporting the Zionism and the settler colonialism in the face of the information that you present to them?
Wow, this is a great question. I love it because since 2016, I'm just going like monthly to the EU and I meet with the delegation. And in the beginning, it was hard. I have to understand how it functions, in fact, when it comes to political parties and the elected people and the parliamentarians, etc. But at the end, the last 3 years, I met just for the Committee of Human Rights, you know. In fact, the Europeans, you know, they took notes and they agree. But I remember before 2 years, the president of the Madame Magarini, before, I mean, the new one, Madame Magarini, and her, let's say, the director of her office, because we never met her, but we met, of course, you know, she has many counselors. And one of them, you know, he said that he has 2 masters, etc., you know. And at the end, when we finished and I left the room, then he carried me like that, like a kid. And he said, you know, Madame Madi, I also study, you know, and I agree totally. But, you know, we have to support Israel. We are colonizers and they are colonizers. So he said, nobody will ever be able to tell you the truth, but I can tell you the truth. So we try with them, you know, in the closed rooms, you know, they hear us very well. They are very polite. They took notes, etc. And they ask questions. When we give them, you know, specific questions, you can follow. I can tell you before 2 weeks, you know, 3 questions raised, comes from us, you know, that we send them specific questions and we send them why this question. We give them like this question related to these violations, according to this convention, according to the position of the EU, Israeli should not do that, etc. And they ask the questions. But in fact, you know, and politically, it's everywhere, you know, it's divided. There is the right wing, there is the left wing, there is the others who don't know where to stand, either here with them. So when there is a vote, unfortunately, it failed because there is, let's say, the majority, they are supporting, or I don't want to say they are supporting Israel, but they don't vote in favor of this question. So this is why, in fact, the EU as a body, sometimes it's positive and sometimes, or most of the time, it's negative because they disagree to separate the voices. And this is exactly what's happened in the UN. And this is why we suffered here a lot in the UN, you know, but because we are talking about laws, we disturb them more in Geneva and they could really vote in favor because otherwise, you know, this is absolutely against, you know, this building, which is called the UN, and you are part of the UN, you know. But in the EU level, unfortunately, it's not the same. It's the political issue. And sometimes, to be very honest with you, and especially once the EU representative here in Geneva, I told them, I'm sure that you will vote in favor of this commission. And then he said, you know, I received by SMS how to vote. Can you imagine? I received by SMS how to vote, and that's it. So he's unable even to explain to his, let's say, hierarchy that this vote is against our, you know, what we sign as conventions. So this is the problem. This is why I said it's politicized, but doesn't mean that we have to remain at home without really bringing this issue to the international level. So in fact, sometimes it works when it comes to some countries. This is why we collaborate more with the northern countries like Finland, Sweden, Norway, etc., And of course, yeah, but unfortunately, we have a big problem from ex-Eastern European countries, and of course, Britain. But I'm happy now the representative in Britain in Geneva, we have a very good collaboration together.
Thank you. Thank you, Rania. That was fascinating. We've got some other questions here. Do you want to ask your question, Heather, which is a very
Yes,
specific question?
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Rania, very much. I'm very, very pleased to be able to hear what you tell us today. My question is about the duration of an occupation. How long in international law can an occupation last?
Okay, very good question. There is no limit, in fact. And if I want to bring one example, always I bring in my conferences for youngs, I told them my mother is older than the occupation, which is mean in my mother's papers, it's written she born in Palestine. This is what I mean. But in fact, no, absolutely there is no limit, because there is one issue I like always to bring, which is the right to resist. People under occupation have the right to resist, to use all methods, even if they were obliged to use arms. You know, arms, it's really a capital, which is mean, this is why I use the law as arm, because so in fact it doesn't exist. And if I consider what France did with Algeria, if it's occupation or colonization, it was last 130 years, you know. So this is why, honestly speaking, I'm very optimistic, and I believe that one day the international community will not really continue. There is a new generation, new education, and I don't think people will continue to be blind about the reality. That's it.
So what are the obligations then of the occupier towards the occupied?
This is very good question. In fact, the obligation of because this is what I start to speak about, that there is many conventions in which the occupation, let's say, they have to respect, first of all, the protection of the population. And of course, to the protection of occupation, it doesn't mean like they will care about the Palestinians more the Palestinians themselves, but which is mean they don't have to violate their rights and to give them the human rights. And you know, Israel signed, let's say, all of the conventions. So when it comes to these conventions, since you sign these conventions, how it comes that you sign and you are really violate these conventions. And in fact, the last report, which was steered by the representative of Israel in front of the General Assembly, because really it was very well written, point by point, and Israel is a part, and they signed this convention this year, and last it's one of the earliest countries that sign all the conventions. Honestly speaking, they are very smart, but when it comes really to implement these, you know, these obligations, it doesn't exist. So in fact, there is no limit for occupation. Absolutely, the law of occupation, you know, you are occupied until you fight to end the occupation, either by arm or negotiations, or I give you that, you give me that. So this is, you know, this is the issue. And I remember when I discussed, and I was against even Geneva initiative, the Geneva initiative, and I speak in that time with the president of Switzerland, Madame Micheline Calmeret, and I was happy in May when they asked her the question, do you still believe that there is, she said, unfortunately, no. You can find the video, by the way. Her name is Micheline Calmeret, and I was very happy when I heard her answer after how long, how much money they pumped the Swiss for this, you know, what's called peace process. We agreed with peace, of course, but they select some people, you know, like hundreds of names, and they put them together as if this is really the peace. No, peace should touch every human being, you know. This is how people will applaud peace, you know. When you give me my rights, then I feel that I'm insecure. And always when I go out with some Jewish friends, or when we meet with Israelis in the UN, You know, they come, they attend all our panels and they ask questions. And I told them, this is funny. We can sit together, we can speak together, we can respect each other. We speak the same language together, but when you return back, then it's completely different. And one of them, she joined us when we did a very important meeting in South Africa. And she told me, can you imagine, even my mother, my father, they don't know that I'm going every day near the checkpoint in order to report, you know, Mahsum Watch. In fact, they report, you know, violations. And when she told me that, then I told her how we will be able, we as a Palestinian, to change the Israeli community if you as Israelian, you are unable to tell your boyfriend who sat next to you in the room or your mother. So this is the problem. And this is the question always I raise when I speak with the Israelis, especially lawyers. I told them, you have to work hard in your community. This is how I could really also convince some Palestinians who still believe that we have to kill them, that etc. This language, you understand what I mean? So in fact, it's easier for me, you know, when they work hard with their community. It's not easy, it's not really enough. Like in 1 week, we will invite Norit Blade. It's great. I love this woman. She's amazing, courageous woman. But there is some names. It's not enough, this name. We want it to become like a normal education, you know, in the education. And I remember Swiss government, they financed a school in Jerusalem called Peace School. And I remember I was really maybe 20 years old. I attended the meeting and I was against the creation of the school. And when the mayor of the city asked me why, I said, because the school will be based in the Israeli part and the Israeli will not let the Palestinians go there. He told me, no, we get agreement from the Israeli. The school lasts 2 years, and then the school now, it doesn't exist any Palestinian child inside. You understand what I mean? So unfortunately, even some initiatives, there is something missing. And I told them, why you want to give a proof to the Israeli that the Palestinians accepted to send their children to your part? Why you don't establish the school in the Arab part and let the Israelis send their children, you know? And of course, the Swiss said, no, this is not how it works. So anyway, at the end, always I said, I still believe that there is a new generation from both sides will change. I don't think that forever mothers or students, etc., they will continue this suffering, because in fact, they don't meet, they don't know each other. In the past, before the war, people could travel, go. I remember my sister, she told me weekly we go to eat in Jaffa, and each time different restaurants. So they met people, etc. Now it doesn't exist. There is no right. It's very hard to get this agreement. And to tell you how the benefit of the Israelis, during the confinement, they start to give really permissions to some Palestinians, but they have to check their record in order to give them the right to go to buy products, etc., because the shops were suffering. And especially after May, you know, when there is this problem, even the Arabs, what we call them Arabs in Israel, they stopped to go shopping in some shops. And I remember there is a reportage, I watched it in the Israeli TV, the women were suffering. She said, our shops is empty because they are the one who consume. And now with the closure, they don't come anymore to the shop. So the benefit, the economic, I mean, when it comes to economy and when it comes to political, it should be combined together.
Thank you.
I hope
Rania.
I was able to answer your question. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a vast question. I'm sure you could talk about it for hours.
Yeah.
We have would you like to ask your question, Linda? Are you there,
Thank
Linda?
you. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, Rania. The more you speak, I know. Hello.
I mention your organization if you have.
And Jeff is still involved.
Yes.
But anyway, the more you talk, the more I want to respond to. But I am right now just going to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And that was the delegation that you mentioned that was in Geneva this week. So there were a few of them from the, 6 NGOs. So you had Al-Haq there, you had Adamir, maybe one or two others. Now, I know that you were trying to get them to really high level people. Did it happen? I mean, did this delegation feel that they made a breakthrough with anybody? Are there people at the UN that are going to be standing up, supporting them, speaking for, you know, the right of human rights organizations, human rights defenders to have that space? Israel's trying to close it, which will affect all of us.
Yep.
Okay, so any progress made this week, please, Rania?
In fact, even before their arrival, there is no need for them to be here, but I'm happy that they were in Brussels, they were in The Hague and in Geneva. And in fact, yesterday with the meeting with the Commission of Inquiry, they said we are waiting within a week to meet with this delegation. But in fact, you know, the Special Rapporteur, Michael Link, he submitted great. The Office of the High Commissioner, another great, yeah. A Human Rights Defender, Special Rapporteur, great. So this is our words, in fact, under the table, you know, we met them, you know, I'm the only one based here. So I have this capacity, in fact, when it comes, and I do it, you know, parallel with my job. My job is nothing to do with that. I work with the IOM. Anyway, it's, no, but this is, it will change nothing in the ground, Linda. You know, this is what about all these reports, etc. How many reports your organization submit about house demolitions, and still, you know, houses demolished, daily people receive this notice, etc. So in fact, it's not enough for me. It should be implemented in the ground. The Israeli, they should understand that they went very far with this. And you know, when I want to disturb any delegation, especially the Europeans, I told them, it's a shame, like when the representative of the EU, they really disagree with the Israeli prime minister when he said we give now our okay to rebuild more and settlements, and that's it. You know, it's a statement, 5 lines, and that's it. That the EU position is disagree, but they continue finance, and there is many companies work in these settlements, and these companies are belong to the European countries. This is why I became, since 5 years, very much active in business and human rights. You know, this forum in which finished last Friday. So, in fact, you know, we have to cover everything in order to reach, you know, a level that the international community feels that this is very bad for them. It should touch them in their houses, you know. Otherwise, unfortunately, we will continue submitting reports until, I don't know, until when the population still believe of human rights. I will tell you, after this accusation of these 6 organizations, you know, many of the people, they said, no, they do nothing. They just travel to Geneva and submit their reports. Of course, you know why? The simple population who are not educated, who don't know nothing about laws, for them, nothing implemented in the ground. So what? So what? Can I bring peace to a family in which they lost their houses in Gaza or their children killed? There is 9 families. They doesn't exist in the record, in the civilian record. All of them were killed, you know, during these wars. So when we are able to bring a little bit of justice to the population, the simple people, this is how I could convince the whole population that really laws bring peace and justice, you know. But of course, me and you and all these kind of people, we still believe of justice.
Thank you, Rania. I think Iman's question is closely related to what you were just discussing. Would you like to ask your question, Iman? Are you there, Iman?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Rani, big congratulations on your remarkable work, yourself and your colleagues, and the steadfastness of your work. Because you have to be so dogged at this, highlighting the contradictions that exist in terms of the apparent human rights and international law commitments of the international organizations and our Western governments. But I kind of wondered, given that you had talked about Palestine used to attract a lot of attention because of the, if you like, the armed resistance and PLO activities and so on. That now would bring about an enormous kind of another Nakba, fierce Nakba like 47 that happened now, I think. But so the alternative now is the use of the law, and there are many ways in which, because we're so resourced by international law and conventions. But I wonder to what extent this emphasis on working legally through those kind of, through that method of negotiating, bringing it forth to international bodies and so on, whether in some ways it maybe can not undermine, but it can divert resources away and attention away from popular resistance. And I mean, I know, of course, both is happening, and there are other things happening, but I do wonder if you could comment about the importance of people also, as I did during the First Intifada, and as they are doing now, in terms of mobilizing now, like the local popular resistance committees, the amazing Great March of Return, which I think was in many ways a great victory, because it highlighted the importance of the right of return.
Yeah.
The amazing mobilization that took place in 48, well, the importance of that, and how there can be different, ways and different kind of strategies to work towards overthrowing the occupation and the apartheid regime. So if you could comment about that, I don't know if I've made that clear or not.
Okay. In fact, we support a lot the popular resistance. Popular resistance, it's not just, it's really people should remain in the land, they should work, etc. And this is why I remember in the past, we used to bring even delegations, this is why we support some small, communities, like by microcredit, in order to establish something. We rent like a shop, women are working to sell their products, etc. And in some small villages in the north, it's not just really these big cities in which everybody know about, Nablus, Ramallah, Hebron, etc. But bringing the issue of the March of Return, yes, it was very important. You can't imagine until which level. And I remember when I invite Saleh Abdelati, who used to be one of the organizers of this, among others, of course, and it was the Commission of Inquiry. They want to submit their report. It was Friday. They want to submit their report Monday. And I heard that he's going to Brussels. I told him, I will pay you a ticket, just come to Geneva one day. And he came to Geneva, and I organized the meeting. And the commissioner, the three commissioners, it was in 2019, they said, what we have seen, he has video, because for them, it's because of Hamas are the organizers. When he proved to them that the popular resistance, all political parties, organizations, and no arms, just one person from Hamas, once he come with his pistolet, and they kick him out, and they told Hamas, we will really finish with your tent, and then they present their excuse. So they were present like all other political parties, the leftist one, Fatah, etc. So in fact, our work, if you want people to resist, it's to have a normal life. It's not just to bring their voices to the international community. They want to eat, they want to drink, they want their children to go to school. This is why we establish organization exists since 30 years, since I arrived to Switzerland, which is in fact parrainage, that each family take care of a child. What's meaning taking care? Taking care to pay his, his material to go to school and to pay the school. And this is why really many children, their families are unable to pay the expenses for their school, clothes, etc. Because now children, they don't need just, their you know, the simple things. Now children, they have their iPhone, you know, so life became is very expensive according to the past. But in fact, since the war in Gaza, 2016, we also have an organization and we pay just students, ladies, in order to go to the university. And we pay the university, by the way, the fees and some money to their, you know, food and transportation. So in fact, we try to do this for the daily basis. And I'm talking about, you know, just Switzerland. And I hope one day we could collaborate with other European countries in order not the help go for just one community and not the other, or just one school and not the other. So we try our best, but this is, I can tell you, it's not enough, because the life is hard for the daily basis. It's not just really, yeah, it's not occasionally, it's daily basis, it's hard. So I agree with you. The popular committees is very, very important, and they are the one who really work hard, in fact, if it comes to the resistance. I don't know, because I didn't really understand very well what you want. So I don't know if my answer fits your question or not. I'm sorry if not, but I'm ready to explain again. Yeah.
Was that a sufficient answer to your question?
Yes, but I'm also a bit, in terms of the popular resistance, I know, like Nadra isn't here today, but Nadra, for example, has written about how Palestinians are oppressed by the twin narratives. One is the Zionist narrative, and the other is the humanitarian narrative. So the issue of, we've got a problem here, for example, in the trade union movement in Ireland, and that some of the trade unions and other organizations that are in solidarity, they extend humanitarian relief, but humanitarian relief is in a way built into the Israeli strategy to make Palestinians dependent. So if people are sending aid or supporting people with school uniforms or getting to school, that is important. But I have the sense that if that's all people do, if they're not addressing the political causes, the underlying causes, then in a sense, you're almost like complicit with the Israeli kind of strategy. Yeah. So I think that distinction, I think, isn't made clear enough to us in the West who want to stand in solidarity.
Yeah, in fact, because you speak about the trade union, we worked before 7 years ago with the UN. You know, there is this well-known international gathering which gather all trade unions and representative of workers, etc. And I remember I lobby, although this is not the level that I do, I mean, when it comes to the ILO, but I did it, in fact, to, let's say, to vote against the Histadrut. Why? The Histadrut, in fact, which is, let's say, the Israeli well-known trade union, okay, they give permissions to some Palestinians to work because they need the workers, which is good. You know, it's for both sides. The Palestinians have to work, and the Israelis, they need their work. And of course, the Palestinians who work, they are very close to some settlements or whatever. And in fact, at the end, all our preparations in order really to bring the question inside the meeting, even with the director of the ILO, can you imagine, the director of the trade unions, he was Cuban, now he changed. And in fact, unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority, they disagree, and they contact the countries and they said, we don't want to vote against. Why? What I heard after, because I asked people, they told me that the Palestinian Authority, they have a deal, or the Palestinian Trade Union, which represents the Palestinian Authority, they have a deal with the Histadrut, and they are the one who select who has the right to work on Israel. And sometimes, unfortunately, I don't know, I don't have really maybe it's real, maybe not. It's like they sell them the right to go to work. So in in one part, the Histadrut cut some money, in fact, like a participation, social participation, and the Palestinian Authority as well. So at the end, this is the big suffering of the Palestinian workers. And I remember when during the confinement, the Israeli Needs workers, they opened some parts and they let some works. I remember many cases they thrown, outside of the border because they discovered they have the virus, in fact. So anyway, we try our best in all levels, but we can't cover everything. This is it's another issue, in fact. Yeah.
Sorry, Brooke, can I just very quickly say that it's well known about the collaboration between the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions and the Histadrut. And I think the forum, the international forum you're talking about, is the ITUC, the International Trade Union Congress. It's because of this collaboration that I think the independent trade union movement in Palestine and the West Bank is becoming more prominent. And they're doing some very, very good work, like the new unions, for example, and the General Federation of Independent Unions. That's also the reason, that collaboration is also the reason why we have formed in Europe the European Trade Union Network for Justice in Palestine. And we've got about 35, 36 European trade unions, including the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, as part of that network now.
I will give another example, the FIFA. Once we lobbied 34 countries who are member to vote for the acceptance of Israel. And we convinced the countries that Israel, because there is no right of movement, how people could run when they can't cross, etc. And at the end, the Palestinian representative, Jibril Erjoub, he really break everything. And the Europeans, they told us, the countries, the member countries, they told us, unfortunately, the Palestinian representative who really, at the end, break the deal. So this is why they were, they vote in a different way. So you understand, we have to fight both sides. And this is really hard when it comes sometimes to this international level. Yeah.
Thank you, Rania. Flavia, I don't know if you feel that your question has been answered about developing strategies to get out of this waiting posture with the EU. Do you want to
Yes,
ask your question?
Thank you. Yes. Now I'd like to hear a bit more from you, Rania. Thank you very much, because you combine a lot of realism with a lot of passion and optimism. So it's because it seems that until now, I don't know whether I am in a pessimistic moment, but no accountability or limit has been actually put on Israel, despite everything that we do, and not just we, but everybody. So I don't know whether I am in a a negative in my view, but I'd like to have an example of when, and I don't mean that the genocide, the physical genocide has been prevented, that's at least that. But it's like a rubber wall, now that whatever you do, you can't break it. No, so they are allowing more discussion and more commissions and more things, but actually nothing goes beyond it. Because, for example, I with the two reports on apartheid, the B'Tselem and the Human Rights Watch, you would have expected a little bit more waves around it in Europe, and so and it actually hasn't happened. So I just like to hear more ideas that you have about the political actions or strategies or hopes in the EU.
Okay, first of all, to be optimistic, it's an arm. So this is one of the arms, because I should give hope to my people, this is why I should be, it's forbidden to be weak, Otherwise I'm a human being. I could go home and cry like any other person, but it's an arm, and when I shake hand with the Israeli representative, I raise my head, I look to his eyes. It's an arm to be strong, it's an arm. When you speak in the EU, I kick the table, I say, this is your convention, I study in your countries, I learn from you. How it comes now that all what I learn, it's not useful? Give me some hope in order to transfer it to my people. So just to tell you, to be strong, it's an arm. Other issues when it comes to, sorry, the other part of your question, now my head is, just a second. Yeah, how to hold Israel accountable. Okay. In fact, we bring some cases about some, let's say, some soldiers, and the Israeli themselves, they investigate, and they found one of the soldiers, he steal a credit card. That's it. This is after the war, after the Goldstone report in 2009, 2008, 2009. So this is the only, because normally the Commission of Inquiry have to ask the government, the accused government, the Israeli government, like, we get this and that. So the country have to investigate either right or not, agreed or disagreed. So the only issue in which they agreed that they found one of the soldier, he steal a credit card. That's it. So in fact, this is bring us to speak about the system, the law system in Israel. When it comes that, the Israeli soldiers are the best in the world when it comes to arm, when it comes to information, when it comes to protection also, the drones, etc. This is why, in fact, this image was broke in this year after, the missiles of Hamas. If I'm agree or disagree, this is another issue. But in fact, it was broke because, with these stupid missiles, everybody run away. They had, okay, And if I want to speak on comparison of the Gazans, they have nowhere to run away. There is nowhere to run away. They don't have really cares to. I mean, I live in a city. Under the city, there is another city in Geneva. Where all the population could be really protected if there is anything, atomic bomb or whatever. So can you imagine in Gaza? They don't have this. So in fact, to hold Israel accountable, it should be something political and also judicial. It should the both, agree together. So this is why when I said that the EU representative, Jerome, he's not anymore, he said, I receive how to vote by SMS from the political side. Who are the political in the EU? So why you send somebody who knows laws, conventions to work in Geneva if you have to send him, by SMS how to vote? I told him when we went after to have a glass of wine, I told him, it's a shame for you. You are a very well-educated person. How you accept? He said, Rania, this is political. It's, so this is why when there is a political will, I think the other part will work hard. And you remember when Madame Bensouda gave her, if you remember, before less than 1 year, she started to be accused that she's anti-Semitic. Trump administration really stopped her visa to the USA, etc. So this is what I mean, the political will. When these big countries, big brothers, decide to put an end to this suffering, and to bring rights to the people, then I think this will happen. So this is why we have to keep hope. We have to keep working with communities. We have to keep really our efforts and to combine political with laws.
Thank you, Rania. I have a small question. You seem to have found a lot of hope in the creation of this ongoing commission
Yes.
of inquiry. Could you explain to us on whose initiative it was, why it was possible to set it up?
Yeah, it's good. In fact, in the past, you heard always after a war in Gaza, there is special session, which is last 1 day, then there is a resolution, and then they create a committee in order to investigate. This ongoing, and then it's finished. We have a great report. We discuss it, voted by states, that it's in the drawers of the, you know, kept in the UN or in our computers. But this ongoing, which means the first report will be submitted in June. I hope if the life comes normal to Europe, then I would love to invite you to come to attend the meeting, because it will be something great. This is the first report. In fact, why this is different? Because it's never happened in the history until now, the history since the creation of the United Nations in 1945, that there is something ongoing. It's like in daily basis, which mean we don't have to wait a session or aggression or war to create a commission of inquiry, you know. So this will be in daily basis, bring the reports until really these big countries have enough, and then maybe they will take the decision to put an end, or I don't know. This should be really combined with politicians, because at the end, any decision, we can go to the highest level, which is for the UN, you know, but when it comes to the Security Council and then 5 countries have the right to vote, then everything will, yeah, you know, so this is why I said we should keep hope, because it's a very strong arm. So this ongoing, first of all, they are great persons. And the chair of the commission, Madame Pillay, who used to be the High Commissioner, she's from South Africa. She's the judge herself. She worked in the ICC. So, you know, they are really qualified, talented people who have really a lots of experience. It's not all, in fact, all commissions, in the past, the special sessions in which they create commissions, they were great, honestly speaking. But this one, it's ongoing, it's daily basis, and it will touch everything. This is why yesterday I was happy when they said, we want you to bring to us new issues in which never covered, you know, and this is very important. So I bring to their attention the uprooting of trees. And you know what, not just that, somebody sent me pictures, but I have to check if the pictures are correct or not, because now with the media, we can do everything, that some old olive trees uprooted from near Nablus and implemented in some settlements. You know, plant them in some settlement, which is stealing the history and put them. And, you know, we have these old trees since, you know, thousands years, you know. And one issue I bring it to their attention, which is unfortunately the church, they never work hard in order to protect the Christians in Palestine, in which, you know, Jesus born there. So I bring to their attention the land of Primizan, in which the land belonged to the church, and we were fighting hard. We bring people from Palestine, Christians, to speak. We prepare really legal cases, Dalia Komsiya and others, and unfortunately the land was confiscated. And yeah, so you know, if even the churches in the world, if they help for a very small project, it will help, but unfortunately not. So why you want me as a simple human being, you know, to be able to bring justice to everybody and to hold accountable Israel, the Israelis? It should all our efforts together, Israeli, Palestinians, international community, people who really want justice for the people. Because I remember when I met the first time Dorit Biled, and she was crying her son, and the other Palestinian cry her son. They are mothers. Your son was in the army, but he's your son. Whatever he's doing, he's your son. You will cry him. You will not say, yeah, he was in the occupation army. So when really the Israeli communities or population start to think in this way, and as well, it will make our work more easier to convince the others as well, that we should live together. We should be together. I would love my son to be in love with our neighbor who is Jewish, who she's from, I don't know. I would love to eat Moroccan food in a house of a family Jewish from Morocco or Tunisian from, etc. This is what we have to work for the future. And this is one of the strategy that many groups start to create, one state solution, etc. I'm in favor, but if the basis were justice, I totally agree with equal rights. Why not? Equal rights, people represented in the parliament. I live in Switzerland. I learn a lot about how it works, you know, the confederation, representatives, etc. This could be a great project, but this is also could be implemented when there is political will. Law is not enough.
Thank you, Rania. I think we're about running out of time. Martin, do you want to ask your question, or shall we?
I'm not going to ask my question because that's a fantastic way to end, Rania. What I will say is that I have a tendency towards pessimism, and I realize that this is an expression of white privilege, and I commit myself to remaining strong as an arm in fighting, fighting for our liberation, joint liberation. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you all for your patience, and I hope I was able to bring the message that I should. I don't want to do something very formal, reports, reading, etc. So I speak like I speak with my friends, with the people who are really want justice for to end this suffering for the Palestinians. Yeah.
So thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
So much.
And, I would love to be invited to hear other conferences, whatever the subject, just to hear, to attend and ask questions. Thanks a lot for
Well,
everything.
we'll be sure to put you on the mailing list.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Take
such
care
an
and
inspiring
stay
talk.
safe. Yeah, bye-bye. Bye.
Okay.